I hope you're settled in, because for a 2v2 this battle is quite long. Now, I got the request back when I did the Edoras replay to play as Gondor next, so naturally I'm playing as Gondor. We're on the map ANDUIN as well, so this is going to be a river crossing, at least kind of a river crossing. Now this is obviously a 2v2, and my ally is playing as Dol Amroth over here. So Dol Amroth being complemented by Gondor, so that's a very lore-friendly thing, and just as lore-friendly are the opponents we're up against, because playing as Harad we have Baconfish 302, and he has several units of dismounted Serpent Guard, quite a few units of Southron Warband as well, so that's a pretty standard frontline for Harad, to be honest with you. And back here he has his more dangerous units. His Trollmen of Harad in particular are a very good unit, probably Harad's most dangerous units are their Trollmen. He has several units of Variag Lancers, so they're light cav. So they will be good against infantry, but maybe not so good against enemy cav, or at least our cav. He has a couple of units of Muhad Berserkers. These guys are pretty good in terms of their damage as well. They won't do a lot of... They won't be very durable, but they will at least dish the pain out on a lot of my armoured units. Got a lot of Muhad Beast Tamers up on this hill, as well as some Southron Archers. He has some Hashari Shadows up here as well, hidden in the... well, they're hidden. He also has a catapult, so he has a good position up on this hill and in this valley, so I'm going to really be the one that's forced to come forward across the river, and I'm going to need to do so. It's going to be difficult for me to get across the river, because his catapult is in range as soon as I get across the river, so forming up my army is going to be a bit of a challenge. I've got a couple of units of Gondor Archers, just standard Gondor Archers. Got a couple of units of Veterans of Osgiliath as well. These guys are much better, much more durable. I've got several units of Spearmen and Infantry on both sides. This is going to be standard for Gondor. And then I have a couple of units of Lasarnak Nobles. I've got a unit of Winged Swordsmen, and my Generals in a Wardens of the White Tower unit. And I've also got a General's Bodyguard and Gondor Knights, so 2 heavy cav max was the rules. Then if we go back over here to Dol Amroth, we have several units of Adhalon Halberds and Men-at-Arms, as you would expect from Dol Amroth. Very armor-centric, and then they have a Catapult, Swan Knights as well, and some Haven Guard. And there are some cav around as well, but I seem to have lost where they are. Now the Runic player over here, who is going to be defending the southern part of the map, there are a few units we can see. We have obviously Gamp Rim and some Carmel's Chosen. There are also several units of Flag Rim hidden around the place, and a lot of Swift Blades. Some Baltroth Tribesmen, some Nar Rim, and he also has some Innis Rim and a General's Bodyguard. He might have a few more things, but most of his army is hidden at the moment. So to start off with, though, it's going to be a bit of a waiting game, because I'm going to need to try and get across the river so that I can effectively make an advance on Harad. Because charging is going to... This is a defensive position which I'm not feeling too confident about just charging into. I mean, down here the Southern Warband and the Serpent Guard are not overly scary, but they are good at holding the line. And this ranged position that he's got up here, these archers and this catapult, is really the problem. This hill is going to be a nightmare to take. I can't just charge either with cav, because there are stakes in the way. This is a good defensive position for Harad, and I certainly don't blame him for taking it up, because also the way I built my army was, because it's a river crossing, I did build it with a bit more of defence in mind. So for example, my general's in a sword and board unit, and most of my units are stuff like spears and standard infantry, not the best stuff for attacking anyway. But nonetheless, this is what I have, and I still am going to be able to do some damage to him, mainly because I do have heavy cavalry, which his archers are going to not really make much of a dent in. He is firing his catapult over at my advancing spearmen on this side. Now, actually trying to attack these units here is a bit of a waste, to be honest with you, because I can use the terrain to sort of block off most of the effect of the catapult. The catapult is an interesting beast. I mean, I would suggest that a lot of the time you're better off saving it for later in the battle, but then if you don't use it quickly enough, you can quickly find the battle turning away from you. If we look over here while I'm moving forward, we will see the vast majority of the Runic army coming out of hiding. So yeah, he's also got some Carmel's Shadow Guard here. There's the Baltroth Tribesmen. So again, javelins, and a lot of... Rune may not be the most durable army, but they are mostly very effective against armoured units. The Flag Rim, the Carmel's Chosen, the Javelins, all of that stuff. So Dol Amroth in that respect are going to have a bit of a job on their hands trying to get through the Runic army, But having said that, Dol Amroth can answer this with armor piercing of their own, with the likes of the halberdiers. The Haven Guard as well are effectively armor piercing with how much damage they can dish out. And also the cavalry of Dol Amroth is probably going to be a significant factor. And the archers. The runic archers are not as good as Dol Amroth's, at least not as good as their best archers. It is going to be an interesting one. Over here we're going to see a skirmish battle across the river take place, really, because we have the very close proximity of the two armies, but the crossing is way down here. So the halberdiers are there, but the halberdiers will take a decent amount of damage from archers. I don't know where the Dol Amroth archers actually are. They're a bit further back, which is a bit of a mistake. They should be further forward. Blackroot Vales and Nimrodel, they are pretty effective in terms of the damage they can deal, but maybe not as effective in a skirmish fight because they don't have the armor. It'll be interesting to see what happens there between the Nar Rim, which are slightly better armored. I'm sending forward my cavalry because it does occur to me that down in the valley over here he doesn't actually have pikes or anything that would be super effective against cavalry. The spears in Spear Wall will do a good job at stopping cav charges. Cav charges now in the latest patch, they are not as effective against shield walls, which is a good thing because otherwise I could really, in the old version of Northern Man, I could really just mow through this area of the line, which would be a bit of a shame because it is a decent defensive position he's taken up. But nonetheless, I will be able to get some decent charges on the Serpent Guard because they're not effective against cavalry. We'll see. We've got to get underneath the trees here. So I'm sending forward my General's Bodyguard. Again, they're a very tough unit to kill. The archers, they may be shooting them, but it's not really going to do too much damage. They may peel off hit points, but ultimately it's not really going to matter. Crunching charge there. He might also get some friendly fire here. So that's a decent amount of casualties there. I wasn't able to just smash through the line. The mass of them in Shield Wall is now much better. But I was still able to get a decent amount of kills. And the Serpent Guard are a good target to go after. Because while they may not be the most dangerous unit Harad have, they are still a very solid centre, which if I can erode that, it's going to give me an advantage in terms of numbers, which I'll probably need considering the numbers, well, considering the types of units that I'm going up against. Another charge into the other unit of Serpent Guards. I'm trying to whittle away his front line a little bit. I think the Serpent Guard are still better than my Gondor infantry, at least in terms of attack. I think the armour of the Gondor infantry is nice to have. He's trying to sort of trap my cav, which isn't a bad idea. Trapping the cav, if you don't have like an active anti-cav line, trapping them can still do a decent amount of damage to them in sustained melee. Going to do a charge with my Gondor Knights. Not quite as good, but they will still do a ton of damage now that they're out of shield wall formation. I do need to get them out of there. So from now I'm just going to be sort of probing his lines with my cav. I've got to be careful that they don't get trapped. Over here the skirmish fight is in full effect. There's some Nar Rim, I think 2 units of Nar Rim. And that might explain why the Dol Amroth archer force is having such success. Or it might just be that the archers for Rune were actually targeting the halberdiers early on. Which does make sense, the halberdiers are a little bit more vulnerable to archers. But if you don't actively target the enemy archers, eventually your archer force is going to be noticeably weaker for it. So yes, the Dol Amroth army here is winning the skirmish fight, but the runic player will have the advantage when setting up on this side of the river. So again, Dol Amroth is probably going to have to be the one to attack. It really depends on how the skirmish fight goes. If we go back over to my front, we will see that I was going to try and charge the catapult, but he was getting his beast tamers over and I would have been trapped, so I thought better of it. And I'm retreating my cav now because he has got a lot of his own cav and I don't want to get trapped. I did a decent amount of damage to these 2 units of Serpent Guard anyway, so I think it was overall a successful attack. And I am slowly starting to bring forward my army. I'm getting a spear wall, or a shield wall forward, backed up by the infantry and backed up by my winged swordsmen. The winged swordsmen I think are still the best looking Gondor unit, with their Zweihanders. The Lasarnak nobles are pretty good as well though. I'm bringing over my archers this side as well. Now over here what I'm going to essentially do is leave this force here of spearmen, infantry and Lasarnak nobles just in place so that he can't flank with his cav, and also it gives me an option to flank around when the rest of his army is committed. The rest of my army however is going to be forming up over here. Now I've got to be careful because the catapult is technically in range and there is a large amount of surface area that he can target. and the winged swordsman here. So really it's just a case of me trying to get into position. He also has his Variag Lancers over here. Now the Variag Lancers will be pretty decent against stuff like archers and units that aren't in shield wall formation, but in a cav-to-cav fight these guys will get absolutely butchered by my cav, and also, you know, they're not the most durable, so my archers will even be able to do a decent damage, well, a decent amount of damage against them. But he does have 3 units of them, so if he manages to micro them correctly, they could be a bit of a pain. Now if we look over here, we notice that my ally's catapult is going to be coming to try and help me out. Now this is a pretty decent move because, you know, the Harad player is already in a defensive position, whereas him and Rune are still maneuvering, but in the long run this might not be such a good idea because ultimately it will turn into a very simple choke point battle between Dol Amroth and Rune on that river crossing point. So maybe the catapult would be better served staying down there, but it can still be useful over here. Now my Gondor Knights are moving incredibly slowly for reasons I don't quite understand. I think I asked for them to be on sprint. He is trying to attack this large amount of surface area down here, which is understandable, so I'm going to try and hide behind the terrain a little bit. And here we have the charge of a Variag Lancer unit into the sides of my Gondor Knights. That's a pretty decent charge, honestly, but the Gondor Knights in prolonged melee are going to easily have the better of these Variag Lancers. He really needs the numbers, he really needs to surround them if he wants to do that. However, the thing is I'm also going to be able to charge forward my General's Bodyguard and get the surround on him. Still has other units of Variag Lancers hiding in the trees. Here comes a charge. So I have effectively managed to surround him. I'm going to do a decent amount of damage off that charge as well. My cav is considerably higher quality than his, and that is a lot of casualties that he just took. They do pull out axes in melee, so maybe it's not the worst sort of trade you can effectively have. More Variag Lancers coming in. They are going to be able to kill a decent amount of my cav, but if I can silence his cav entirely, that will give me effectively the freedom to set up. Whereas before it was kind of a bit more of an annoyance to do so with his cav in play. So we'll see. Let's see what's going on further down. The skirmish fight I think is still in full effect. The Blackroot Vale archers still firing at the Nar Rim, I believe. And the clansmen. I'm a little bit confused as to why the clansmen are here. I mean, I know that they're effectively just meant to be garbage, but they could still be useful in a choke point battle. I mean, I know that what the enemy's doing here is he's essentially trying to waste the ammo of the Dol Amroth player on the clansman when it could be better served in the inevitable choke point battle that's going to take place down here on the river crossing. So it is a bit of a shrewd move, and I think the Dol Amroth player is not really doing the right thing by trying to shoot these clansmen. The clansmen are no threat in melee at all. They're basically just cannon fodder. They will do, you know, the only time they're useful is really when you get the surround out and as a hit point sponge. So not really sure the Dol Amroth player is doing the right thing there. Meanwhile, what's Baconfish doing? There are trees in the way, trees everywhere. Now, what I did was I charged forward some spears and he effectively ran away with what was left of his cav, and his cav are, I think, behind his lines again now. Yes, they are. Now, his cav is looking in a bit of a sorry state. He's got 19 and 6, 2 units, and oh, he's got a unit of 47 as well. But still, that is a decent amount of losses he took. Honestly, it's not a terrible trade for him though, because I did take some losses on my cav, so not a bad trade for him, but now I do have the opportunity, essentially, to get more of my men across. I have my archers in place as well now. Now, if he charged forward with his cav again, my archers would do a lot of damage to light cav. It's one of the problems with light cav. They can easily be zoned out by ranged units, whereas heavy cav, like this, the heavily armoured Gondorian cavalry, will soak up archer fire that isn't armour piercing in a hurry. Now what I'm going to do is I'm sending over 2 units of Gondor infantry. I'm also going to send over a couple of units of my veterans, well, my veterans of Osgiliath essentially, and I'm going to set them up on this little hillock over here, and then I'm going to set them up on this part here so I can shoot down with my archers into his defensive line, with the Gondor infantry sort of forming a front line. This effectively means I'm going to be sort of kind of flanking, and also it means that I'm far enough away from his archers and his catapult that it's much less likely they will hit and do decent damage. Now I'm going to sort of protect my advance with my cavalry, because my cav can charge down any infantry that tries to stop my veterans of Osgiliath getting in position. In melee, the veterans of Osgiliath are pretty darn good anyway, but I'd much rather they expend their ammo before they have to get into that sort of fight. And of course I've got my spearmen guarding my allies' catapult. Now, there goes an allied catapult. He is starting to shoot up onto the hill though, so if we have a look. Now if we look over here, he managed to get one Hashari Shadow, which is nice I suppose. But really this hill position is something that I wanted gone because it was making life difficult in terms of me advancing. It's going to be interesting. Like, what I'm going to have to try and do is weaken his defences elsewhere and then charge across the river with the units that I've got in reserve over here. Managed to get a couple of beast tamers. They are in loose now though. The skirmish fight is still going on down there. You can see that from the map. Now down here he has taken a few casualties, but he still has a decent amount of Serpent Guard and Southland Warband, so I don't want to just engage him directly. What I'm going to do instead is set up over here. Now these two units of Gondor infantry will not hold out long against superior numbers, but in shield wall they will at least do so and buy enough time for my other units to advance. Because I am sending over my, well, I've got my veterans of Osgiliath. They have decent amounts of stats in melee, but I don't really want them in melee for the time being. But what I am going to be doing as well is sending over my winged swordsmen wherever they be. What I'm going to be doing to sort of support my Gondor infantry that's over there is sending over my Wardens of the White Tower and my Winged Swordsmen. These two units are very, very good. I don't think any of the Harad infantry can actually one-to-one deal with the Wardens of the White Tower. The Trollmen arguably might be able to deal with the Winged Swordsmen, but the vast majority of Harad's infantry force will not be able to go toe-to-toe with the best of mine. It is one of the advantages I have. Unfortunately, one of the advantages I don't really have is numbers. And also the position as well. Like, the Harad's position is very, very good. They have got a nice defensive position here, but he is going to be forced to come forward because I have got these units in shield wall and I've got a very nice position with my veterans. I'm going to be trying to shoot into the back of those dismounted Serpent Guard just to get the most amount of kills I possibly can. Veterans of Osgiliath, they don't actually do the highest amount of base damage. They do 9, which is decent. But there are 10s and 11s and 12s knocking around. What the veterans of Osgiliath really have, however, is they are tough. You know, for archers, they can pull out their shields in melee. They are not the easiest unit to skirmish down. Certainly his Southron archers would not be able to do it. My Gondor archers, it's much closer, but even then I think my Gondor archers are still better. Now he's charging forward. His archers are able to get some shots off on my Gondorian infantry, but that's not going to do a ton of damage in shield wall. He's charging with his warband. Now the warband on their own will definitely not be able to win against the Gondorian infantry, but backed up by Serpent Guard, that's much more debatable. The Serpent Guard, you know, at least I did have them in shield wall, and I am kind of sort of forcing them down the hill, but the problem that I have is the Trollman. Now the Trollman will very easily mulch their way through Gondor infantry. No, they may have shields, but they are very similar in many ways to the Nazkai bodyguard, as I've mentioned before. They're really an offensive heavy infantry unit, and they will do a ton of damage. He's bringing out his Variag Lancers again. Again, he's going to try and... What he's really going to try and do, I think, is to charge into the sides of my Gondor infantry, but of course, I have my own cavalry, and I'm just going to charge in. Variag Lancers. Now, I was going to try and go around, but unfortunately this wall was in the way. It's one of the things about Anduin. You have to be aware that there are sort of these mini structures that you see around. By the looks of things on the map as well, the skirmish fight is still going on. He's trying to charge into the side of my infantry, which is a worthwhile thing to do. He's also going to try and get into my veterans of Osgiliath, but really his cavalry is going to be mopped up too quickly, and that was a very weak charge. He's not going to be able to get much done at all against the veterans, and in melee the veterans are very tough. In a sustained melee fight, the Variag Lancers will get absolutely slaughtered by the veterans of Osgiliath. So what you really want to be doing is you need to just charge and then leave, and that was not a good charge at all. Now over here though, we can see that he has overloaded the front line with Muhard Berserkers and Serpent Guard, and he is able to smash through the middle of my Gondorian infantry. So what I really need to do is get my infantry support in. Fortunately I have my winged swordsmen on the way, so they're going to charge into the side, and then my Wardens of the White Tower are going to park themselves in front of the veterans of Osgiliath. I also have my Gondor archers over here, So they are going to effectively get a flanking shot onto the attack that they're making on my line, whereas the veterans of Osgiliath are going to be sort of attacking the centre with their archers, or their arrows I should say. The Muhad Berserkers are a pretty good target to go after as well. They're not well, they're definitely not focused on defence with those giant bone clubs. One problem I do have, however, is Trollmen are coming after my standard Gondor archers. Now, I do have my Cav over here, but the Cav is not really something that's going to be too thrilled to go up against the Trollmen of Harad. I can get some decent charges off on them, but ultimately, it's going to be mutually assured destruction over there, I fear. I have my Winged Swordsmen in the fight now, though. And the Winged Swordsmen are going to slice their way through the Serpent Guard with ease, especially when they're being squeezed by the Wardens of the White Tower. Down here we still do have some Gondor infantry in play, but they're up against Muhad Berserkers. But the Winged Swordsmen are going to be very efficient at dealing with Muhad Berserkers and Serpent Guard. If the Trollmen were over here, it would be a bit of a different story. A nice kill there with the Zweihander. He is sending over some more depleted units of Serpent Guard to try and keep this attack alive. Really, at this stage, what he should be doing is committing more of this, to be honest with you, because I'm getting decent shots off on his Southern Warband with my veterans of Osgiliath. Meanwhile, we will go down here, because the battle is finally being met, or at least it looks like it. Down here, the Blackroot Vale Archers, well, I say the battle is finally being met, these Blackroot Vale Archers are sort of advancing on their own. What else have we got down here? Cavalry. Now, the Cavalry has effectively been blocked by this unit of stakes, at least. You can micro them through, but it's really not worth it, especially when you'll just be microing them through onto Lote Gamp Rim. Gamp Rim, very effective unit. Now, these unit of Runic Swiftblades are going to charge forward and try and deal with these Blackroot Vale Archers, which are being used as fodder, but I'm very confused as to why these unit of Blackroot Vale Archers were not advanced with the main army. Even if they're used as fodder, they can still be used as a kind of hit point sponge for your units that matter. And these Swiftblades are just going to kill them, basically. And even if the Blackroot Vale Archers do get some decent damage done on the Swiftblades, it's essentially just a unit of mid-tier infantry. It's not worth it. Anyhow, we'll wait until the main advance of Dol Amroth occurs, which it will. Now over here, my Wardens of the White Tower and my Gondorian Winged Swordsmen have effectively formed the barrier. Another unit of Serpent Guard coming in, but they will not have the desired effect, I fear. Let's have a look over here where my Cav was. As you can see, my Cav is no longer here, but neither is his Trollman. So effectively it was just tit for tat there, but my Cav was a big loss. Like, that mobility is not going to help. Well, the loss of that mobility is a bit of a serious blow. Still firing with my archers. I now do have a decent defensive line in front of my archers, with my Gondorian Spearmen in shield wall. Now, however, you can see that I have sprung my assault over here. I have charged across the river now that most of his units have been occupied. I've got Spearmen. Now, this is not a unit fight that I'm going to win, essentially. The Beast Tamers should be able to hold back the Spearmen, but I am going to overload the line with infantry. Perhaps more significantly, I'm going to try and go around the back of his attack that's trying to go over on that little hill over there with my Lasarnak Nobles. Now, the Lasarnak Nobles are not as good as the Winged Swordsmen, but they are still a pretty decent shock infantry unit. Unfortunately, he does notice this, and he does start shooting them with arrows. And they are shock infantry, so they are going to take a decent amount of losses, especially under this amount of fire. However, we'll see. What I'm trying to do is sort of squash this force over here and deal with them quickly. The Trollmen versus 2 units of Lasarnak Nobles would be an interesting fight, but unfortunately the arrow fire, and perhaps more significantly a unit of Runic Cav that has come to reinforce my enemy, is just going to crush these Lasarnak Nobles underfoot, and that's going to be very unfortunate because they are a decent unit, but in this sort of fight they aren't going to be allowed to get their damage out, and that's kind of a bit of a misstep by me, it must be said. Like, I kind of misused my Lasarnak Nobles. I wanted to finish off this fight down here as quickly as I could. I was also bringing up my Spearmen to really close the jaws, but I'm not going to be allowed to do that, so the Harad player is still going to have a way out. That Innis Rim charge, that's really going to just destroy what I had there. Meanwhile, if we go up onto this hill though, I did manage to get what was left of my cavalry into this unit of Southron archers, and this unit of Southron archers will lose to this amount of cav. Heavy cav is very, very durable. Meanwhile, I have also managed to get a unit of Gondorian infantry around. So I did manage to silence his bows, but not quickly enough for my Lasarnak nobles, and it wouldn't have mattered anyway with that cavalry in play. So these Southron archers are going to get killed. However, this front line that I've got going on is not going to get anywhere. They are just there to occupy the Beast Tamers and the Hashari Shadows. The Hashari Shadows, very good in melee. They're not durable at range to certain units of archers. Apparently we will smash the enemy. But yes, you know, that is the situation at the moment. I'm trying to take the hill. My defensive force over there is holding on very, very well, but in the middle my Lasarnak nobles were butchered, and now I have to deal with a unit of rogue cavalry. The Innis Rim don't have hit points though, I believe. I could be wrong about that, that might have changed. But I am still trying to shoot them with archers to just try and ward them off. I'm going to try and trap them as well. Now though, the fight over here looks like it's going to be beginning in earnest. The Edholland Halberdiers are moving up, but they're moving up basically unsupported. And they're also moving up into a volley of Balshoth tribesmen. Yeah, the problem that Dol Amroth is having here is that they're advancing in a staggered fashion, when they really need to just be going in. You know, you don't want to charge into pikes uncaringly, but you also don't want to be sending up just 2 units of halberdiers, especially not as slowly as this. Really, this is some severe missteps that the Dol Amroth player is making here. The men-at-arms should also at this point be running. Like, the damage has been done, but you really need to be, there needs to be some urgency over here. Mainly because, you know, the runic player is just having a field day against these Edholland Halberdiers. And if we look here, yeah, there are more tribesmen just getting much more cost-effective damage done. Again, you know, maybe they couldn't be dealt with by the archers because of the skirmish fight earlier on, but you could have at least had the Blackroot Vale archers be a shield, like sort of a hit point shield. Here, though, it's a very weak attack, it must be said. You know, and the damage has already been done. The Gamp Rim are going to easily win, and you're not supporting them quickly enough. You know, and now the Dol Amroth men-at-arms are just stood here. So the runic player is really having a lot of luck against the Dol Amroth player, because that is not the way you want to advance in a staggered fashion like that, especially into stuff like javelins. Now over here, the Trollmen have actually reversed the tide of battle over here a little bit. So I had to commit some of my veterans of Osgiliath to melee, and even then the Trollmen are still doing a decent job. I'm going to have to try and get my Gondorian spearmen in to try and surround them, but the problem that I have is this unit of cavalry, so the runic player is really doing a good job on both fronts because he's making life a bit of a pain for me as well. Now that wasn't as good a charge as he could have had. I'm trying to get my veterans of Osgiliath that are out of ammo into melee against the Trollmen, because they will be much better served going in there, and I'm trying to trap the cavalry. They will start to die because they are essentially trapped by spearmen in the background and archers that are out of ammunition. And over here we see another unit of archers that are out of ammo, just trying to bog them down. And in sustained melee, a unit like this will fall by the wayside pretty quickly. Meanwhile, if we look over here on the hill, there's still a real meat grinder of a fight going on over here. This part of the fight is something that the Harad player is winning, but I did manage to finish off this unit of archers, so now I'm going to be able to get a surround on these beast tamers with a unit of infantry. So that should have an effect. That should make this fight much closer. And it's going to be interesting to see who wins the hill fight. Over here, meanwhile, my cav is still going, mulching their way through this Southern Arch unit. A unit this small, there's not really much else they could do. Let's have a look at what's going on over on the river crossing. Now finally, the coastal wardens have been brought up. The Kharmul Shadow Guard have taken the brunt of their fury, which is a worthwhile tactic to go after because they are dangerous. This, however, was not a particularly fantastic line that was made, mainly because the Edholland Halberdiers were so thin on the ground by that point and unsupported that the runic player was essentially able to smash through the line in one place. The Balshoth tribes are not great in melee, but in this sort of situation where you're just sort of getting through the lines, trying to occupy the enemy javelins, it's a worthwhile thing to do. Again, over here we have Flag Rim. They're going to beat Dol Amroth men-at-arms because of their effectiveness against armor.
like this, we will smash the enemy.
There are still units of men-at-arms back here, and I don't understand.
Our foolish general has
Well,
three
there
times.
goes my general.
The enemy general
And the
is
enemy
dead.
general. So the Harad general and my general are both dead. So again, tit for tat, which seems to be the order of the day in that fight over there, to be honest with you. Over here, though, I don't understand quite what my ally was doing with regards to this advance. I obviously couldn't see what was going on because I was too busy microing, but I was hearing what was going on via the mic, and I'm not entirely sure what he was thinking with regards to this staggered advance, because it will ultimately lead to his defeat. It is kind of already a lost cause, because several parts of the line are already horrendously undermanned, and he's now committing his Calm Walls Chosen, which again, they're effective against armour as well now, so stuff like that will be able to defeat Swan Knights. The Haven Guard are around here somewhere, I believe. I mean, the Haven Guard really are the unit at this point. They need to be committed. You know, the bleeding is probably terminal at this point, but the least you can do is do as much damage and then hope that I beat Harad and have enough men to deal with them. But the advance across the river was poor, and it's what has effectively led to that percentage kill was a lot more in our favour earlier on in the battle. Now it's going to start closing. Not a great advance. Meanwhile, over here, the cavalry was dealt with, and now this fight over on this little hill, I'm going to very easily win, mopping up this unit of trollmen, so I do have a victory to be said over here. Now, it's worth saying that my ally does have cavalry, that he is flanking around, and he flanked around through my old battlefield. This is a worthwhile tactic, and this is something that my ally really did well, because he's now going to be able to charge into the back of the runic lines, but the damage to his infantry is so significant that the runic
They have lost half their men.
the runic player will probably have sufficient men to deal with him. At least he's going to have the amount of men to sort of turn around and face the Cav. Meanwhile, up here on this hill, the battle is still pretty close, honestly. These beast tamers, though, it is looking like I'm going to lose the battle up on this hill, to be honest with you. These Hashari shadows are very good in melee. And the Gondor infantry and spearmen that I have up here are not really made for this kind of thing. I also committed the rest of my cav. There were only like 4 units, but the Hashari shadows dealt with them. It's a very close fight between me and Harad, but if it was just me against Harad in this fight, I would probably be having the win here. It is fair to say that I have a significant amount of men left, whereas he doesn't. The problem that we ultimately have, however, is this fight over here, because the runic player definitely has the upper hand over here in a big way. Where's the Haven Guard? I know the Haven Guard are around here somewhere. There they are. Again, too far behind the main line. And when they commit them now, they're going to be overwhelmed. If you just look here, the Dol Amroth initial assault was here, but they were easily pushed back to the riverbank again. Ugh, excuse me, allergies. But yes, Dol Amroth men-at-arms are a good unit, but they're not going to be good if you stagger them like that. As well, the Etalond halberdiers, they were offered basically no support. And then the Dol Amroth men-at-arms were sent in without more elite units to back them up. The Dol Amroth men-at-arms should have been sent in with the coastal wardens immediately behind them. The Haven Guard will now come in, and they will do a decent amount of damage to the Carmel Shadow Guard and the Flag Rim, but on their own they will not be able to deal with this amount of runic infantry. We look over here as well. Gamp Rim. You know, they're kind of not in formation against the Swan Knights, so we'll see. The runic player still has that cav. The Dol Amroth cavalry is in the background, and unfortunately for him, the pikes have noticed this and are turning around. So I'm interested to see if he will charge into the pikes, because if he does, that is one of the most horrendous moves he could ever make. Oh dear, he's going to do it, isn't he? Pikes down. Yeah, well actually, no, the enemy would probably be better served. Well, now he is, he's sending in his pikes, so these Doran and El Lancers are going to be put to the sword with impunity, I fear. Meanwhile, well, the fight on my front is honestly just a grind at this point. A grind where I'm trying to deal with the Trollman. Now, that cav charge was very weak, and look at how many losses he sustained. He was going to charge into the pikes anyway, so that was really a move that was completely bonkers. Now, Swan Knights... Oh, excuse me. The Swan Knights are going up against the Bodyguard. Now, that's a much closer fight, but the Bodyguard will still ultimately win. If the Lancers were able to get a rear charge into them, it would be a different story, but unfortunately the Lancers seem intent on charging this unit of pikemen, and did you see how they got slaughtered? It seems to be misstep after misstep with the Dol Amroth army, to be honest with you, because the Runic player is not really having to do an awful lot in terms of he's just having to sort of sit there and absorb the pressure. And the pikes really have dealt with the cav. Again, he's charging into the pikes. Why? Why, I tell you? It's a massacre. These Swan Knights are... well, the balance of forces is evenly matched. The Bodyguard... the Swan Knights are doing a decent job against the Bodyguard now, but the Flag Rim is on the way. And ultimately, it's not good. The Dol Amroth infantry is largely completely spent. There's a unit of Swan Knights over here. There's a few stragglers of Dol Amroth men-at-arms. There is the Haven Guard still. The Haven Guard is doing well, you know, but on their own they're going to be surrounded pretty soon by Gamp Rim, by Balchoth Tribesmen, and by other units of Flag Rim, you know. Basically it's going to be how much damage can they do, and the answer is not enough, because the units that I have remaining in my army are poorly equipped to deal with this. Sort of Spearmen and Veterans of Osgiliath, they're relying on their survivability and their armour. Flag Rim, you know, Shadow Guard I think they're called again, what, Camel's Shadow Guard, yeah. They're good against armour. And now his cav, it was a valiant effort to try and charge the infantry, but it's now going to be trapped by the enemy general Bodyguard. And Rune is going to have a pretty crushing victory on this flank, it must be said. What's this over here? A unit of Nimrodel Rangers.
Our army is tiring.
The army is tiring. Yes, it's unsurprising. Now if you look over here, I was victorious against the Trollmen, but I lost on the hill essentially. Now what I'm going to try and do is I'm trying to go around. I'm trying to go around and I'm going to try and support my ally. However, pretty quickly it becomes apparent that I'm not going to make it. There goes the enemy general. That's going to cause a lot of breakage. It becomes pretty clear that because I don't have cavalry I'm not going to make it in time, because all of my units are on foot. Now this is the problem, because I don't have anything to deal with that one unit of Bodyguard that we still have. Without that unit of Bodyguard I could perhaps put forth a more comprehensive defence, but as it is I'm going to need to nuke box with my Spearmen to try and deal with this cav, because otherwise the cav is just going to charge me into oblivion. It's pretty clear at this point though that Dol Amroth's doom is upon it. A foolhardy advance followed by a misuse of cavalry has caused Rune to have a pretty clear victory on this flank, honestly, with a lot of their good units still intact. Like, that's the problem. Like, a lot of my units have been expended against Harad, and Harad still have a unit of Ashari Shadows and Beast Tamers ready to reinforce Rune. So while I was victorious on my flank, it wasn't really by much. Meanwhile, these Swan Knights, they're fighting to their death. They're broken. Over here, the Haven Guard, they're still fighting, and they will still get some kills, but you know, victory still seems certain. The Haven Guard are such monsters in sustained melee. But again, they were not committed soon enough. Most of the Dol Amroth units were already dead by the time they arrived, so they couldn't really support in the way that they could have. Also this Shadow Guard. So yes, it's quite clear that Rune is going to have a lot of success. Now over here, what I'm thinking of doing is I need to form a defensive position somewhere, but I can't do it in the open, otherwise I will be charged. But to my luck, there are a series of ruins over here which will act as a sort of barrier to a lot of what the enemy can do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up here in a kind of box with my spears, with my other units in between it. And these pillars and this fountain over here will act as a kind of another wall that they can't really get through. And also I can use these walls to my advantage. So I'm moving my men, or at least I'm going to be moving my men over there. I was thinking about attacking and trying to destroy Harad, but it would take too long. And by then the enemy cav would be upon me. Looking over here. Yeah, Dol Amroth is basically destroyed. The Haven Guard over here are still fighting, but the cav is going to be sufficient to kill them. Yep, just one, and the Shadow Guard kills him. So now I'm going to make a little cut, because it is essentially just a lot of manoeuvring, because I get into the walls and then the enemy manoeuvres into position. There is still one catapult crewman left for Dol Amroth somewhere, but we'll make a little cut to my heroic, well, kind of heroic, final stand. So here we have tactical geometry at its finest. I have spearmen guarding on every flank trying to stop that cav, but also a line to deal with the Rune and Harad armies that are closing in. They're circling like vultures. I don't really stand much of a chance here because my spearmen, while they're good, they're not going to be able to stand up to a lot of the runic armor-piercing units. My veterans of Osgiliath are still pretty healthy, and they will do a decent job at holding, but I don't have enough winged swordsmen to do the damage that I need, nor do I have a lot of Wardens of the White Tower remaining either. So as you can see, most of my elite units were expended against Harad, whereas a lot of runes, scarier stuff like this Carmel's Chosen over here, is still very much in play. The Gamp Brim is also a problem. Like, even without the cav, I doubt I would be able to win this, at least without the presence of this cav. Mainly because the Gamp Brim are going to be much more effective in an elongated line battle than my spearmen, especially because my spearmen are exhausted. He's charging in. I'm going to try and prop up my spear wall lines with my veterans of Osgiliath. They're a lot more survivable. This Carmel's Chosen is a unit which I just don't have any answer to, though. They're good against armor. They're not the most durable unit in the world next to certain other units, but you know, I'm going to try and plug the gap with a depleted unit of archers. Over here, spears doing their best to take on the flag rim. Another depleted unit of veterans. Going to send in my winged swordsmen into the sides, and then keep my wardens of the White Tower here. They're going to be charged by Hashari shadows, though. So I'm going to... They had gained the upper hand quite a long time ago. I don't know which one of my units which was sort of making the balance of power more even. I suppose it must have been my Wardens of the White Tower and Veterans of Osgiliath, because they are both hit point based units. I'm going to try and send in my Gondor archers to save my Wardens, but it's not really going to work. Looking over here, my Veterans of Osgiliath are going to have a decent amount of luck though. You know, they are a tougher unit, they will do a decent job in melee. But over here we can see the line is kind of crumbling in the middle already. The Gamp Rim very easily managing to split apart my units of spearmen. They're wavering. Excuse me. And the Carmel's Chosen. The Balchoth Tribesmen are wavering, well now they're just shaking. But the Carmel's Chosen, I really don't have any answer for them. Like, they're going to carve through all of my units that are remaining, rely on armour, and Gondor in general is a very armour reliant faction. But I don't really have the elites anymore. The Wardens of the White Tower would probably do a decent job if they were healthy, but not like this. And as you can see, my new box has already crumbled. It was a valiant attempt by the spearmen to hold back units far better than them. I'm still having to keep these spearmen here. They're wavering in the face of that cavalry. If we look over here as well, the Hashari Shadows victorious against my depleted archers and my Wardens of the White Tower. Well, there's one left. And now there's none left. Slain on the battlefield, the Hashari Shadows proved themselves to be a very good unit, probably Harad's best unit overall, to be honest with you. My best unit was probably my winged swordsmen overall. They did a lot of damage in the very grindy battle that they were in. I'm charging into the backs of these Carmel's Chosen now. I've really given up at this point. There's no chance. This bodyguard is going to charge into the back, and they're already routing. I'm not sure what my best unit was. Well, aside from my winged swordsmen, the Veterans of Osgiliath were pretty good. The runic player, I would say his army as a whole was really the key here, but the javelins were pretty good. Ironically, the clansmen, absorbing the fire of them archers, you know, the archers could have been very useful in that choke point battle that Dol Amroth found themselves in. But ultimately, I think that definitely Rune was the MVP here. The runic army is very much still intact, a lot of their good units are still there. And I had no answer to it at the end. The Harad player played well, I have to say. But in the end, I think the key for me was that he didn't have the amount of armor-piercing units that he needed to really meet my army head-on. And that was why I ended up... Ultimately, if it was just me against Harad, I would have won. You know, I think maybe if he had some of the Harad javelins, he would have had a much better time against me, but nonetheless, it was still a very closely fought fight between myself and Harad. And there goes my army. The Veterans of Osgiliath held, they didn't break, but ultimately that is it. As you can see, it was the Dol Amroth player well, the Dol Amroth player got a decent amount of kills, but the Harad player didn't get many kills against me, but then that was because I had a slightly smaller army, it must be said. At least, well, I say that. I had a decent amount of deployed units. It's interesting. I suppose I did beat Harad fairly clearly in the end then. You know, the Dol Amroth player capitulated in the face of Rune, and Rune, he got a lot of kills. He got the most kills because obviously he was able to finish me off at the end, but he also did a very good job against Dol Amroth. Now, as we see here, the Winged Swordsman, my highest kills on any one of my units. My Veterans of Osgiliath did well. One of my units of Gondor Infantry did very well. That was the unit that I assume was mulching through that Southron Archer unit and then got the flanking maneuver. They ultimately died to the Hashari Shadows. The General's Bodyguard actually got the most kills. You know, that's not surprising again. The early charges, they also managed to mulch their way through a Southron Archer unit in its entirety. So yes, that is my army again. I would say Rune were definitely the ones that won that fight for the enemy. Harad put up a good fight. Dol Amroth made a lot of mistakes in that sort of that river crossing section. They didn't advance how they should have, and Rune really took advantage of that, and that was ultimately why they won. But it was still a very good fight, a very long fight as well, very closely fought. It ebbed and flowed early on. We had the upper hand. Then, as the battle progressed, the Easterlings gained the upper hand more and more. I hope you enjoyed that river crossing. If you have any factions you want me to play next in a replay, do let me know. And I hope you'll join me for that. I think I'll be doing the top 10 crossbows next, maybe, in terms of like a top 10 unit. I might do the top 10 mid-tier infantry unit as well, but that's a little bit more difficult for me to do. I'm going to have to think of a way to do that, but still, I hope you'll join me for whatever's next, and I hope you enjoyed this one.